observatory.
We all have our secrets.
There is a car that did not just appear in a movie. It became the movie. Silver birch paint, wire wheels, and enough gadgetry packed into a British Grand Tourer to make a defense contractor nervous. It drove off a film set in 1964, and then, for 40 years, it simply ceased to exist. No museum, no collection, no auction house, no trail. Just gone. And the story of how it disappeared, where it went, and what happened when somebody finally found it again is one of the most remarkable cold cases in the entire history of movie cars. Hi, my name is Johnny, and this is American Muscle. And look, I know what you're thinking. Johnny, this is a British car. You called the channel American Muscle. Fair point. But when a car is this important, this historically significant, and this genuinely mysterious, we go where the story takes us. No apologies. Let's get into it. The car itself. What makes the DB5 the DB5? Before we talk about what happened to the car, we need to talk about what the car actually was. Because the Aston Martin DB5 is not just a movie prop that got famous. It was already something extraordinary before Sean Connery ever folded himself into the driver's seat. Aston Martin had been building handcrafted Grand Tourers out of Newport Pagnell in Buckinghamshire, England since the 1950s. The DB lineage, named for David Brown, the industrialist who purchased the company in 1947, represented everything the British car industry wanted to believe about itself. Elegant, fast, expensive, built by craftsmen who treated each car as a personal statement rather than a unit of production. The DB5 arrived in 1963 as the evolution of the DB4. Under the bonnet sat a 4-liter inline 6-cylinder engine, twin overhead camshafts, triple SU carburetors, producing 282 horsepower in standard trim, 0 to 60 in 8.1 seconds, top speed of 143 miles per hour. For 1963, that was not a slow car. That was a genuinely serious machine that also happened to be one of the most beautiful things on 4 wheels. The body was designed by Carrozzeria Touring of Milan under their Superleggera construction method, a lightweight aluminum skin over a tubular steel frame. The word elegant gets thrown around a lot in car writing. The DB5 earns it. Long hood, short deck, a fastback roofline that flows into the rear with a kind of effortless authority that no committee ever designed. This was one man's vision executed by craftsmen who cared. The standard price in 1963 was £4,175 in Britain, at a time when the average annual wage was roughly £900. This was not a car for ordinary people. It was a car for people who had already solved the problem of money and moved on to more interesting questions. Fewer than 900 DB5s were built in total across the production run, each one slightly different from the last, because that is what happens when human hands build cars instead of assembly lines. By the time Goldfinger went into production in 1964, the DB5 was already a known quantity among people who paid attention to such things. What Eon Productions did was introduce it to everyone else. How the DB5 got the job. Here is a detail that gets lost in the mythology. The DB5 was not the original plan. Let me say that again because it tends to surprise people. James Bond was not always going to drive an Aston Martin. In the Ian Fleming novels, Bond drove a supercharged 4.5-liter Bentley, an older, heavier, pre-war machine that reflected Fleming's own tastes more than any notion of cinematic sleekness. In Dr. No and From Russia with Love, the film Bond drove a Sunbeam Alpine. Not ugly, but not exactly the stuff of legend either. The pivot happened because of a relationship. Eon producer Albert Broccoli had a personal connection to Aston Martin through John Wyer, the company's general manager. The discussion around Goldfinger created an opportunity. Aston Martin would supply cars. The production would feature them prominently. No money changed hands in the traditional sense. What Aston Martin received was something no advertising budget could buy. 2 DB5s were initially provided to the production. Both were modified by the special effects team led by John Steers, who would later win an Academy Award for his work on the original Star Wars. Steers and his team worked with the cars for a period of several months, fitting them with the gadgetry that would make the cars famous. The original brief came from the script and from the source material. Fleming's novel had included a few gadgetry nods. The film took that premise and expanded it well beyond anything Fleming had imagined. This was 1964. The Cold War was very much a present reality, and audiences were primed for exactly this kind of technological fantasy. What they did to it. The Q branch build. Let's talk about what they actually built, because the Q branch modifications on the Goldfinger DB5 are worth understanding in detail. Some of them were real, some were purely cinematic. The distinction matters. The revolving number plates were functional, 3 sets, British, French, and Swiss, on a rotating drum operated by a switch on the center console. That mechanism actually worked on the primary gadget car. You could flip a switch and the plates would rotate, not quickly, not elegantly, but they worked. The tire slashers, the extendable blades built into the rear wheel spinners, were also functional as a mechanical extension. Whether they would have survived contact with an actual tire at speed is a separate question, but the mechanism itself was real and operable. The ejector seat is where we need to have an honest conversation. There was a roof panel that could be opened from inside the car. There was a seat mechanism. But the actual ejector seat seen in the film, the one that launches the passenger through the roof, that was a separate effect achieved through other means. The car had the apparatus. The launch was movie magic. The front-mounted machine guns, recessed behind the front indicators, were functional as prop weapons. Blank firing, not live, but the mechanism that revealed and concealed them operated correctly. The rear-mounted water jets, the oil slick sprayer, the smoke screen, the radar screen, all of these were built into the car and were operational to varying degrees. This was not a car with painted-on gadgets. The team genuinely engineered working versions of most of what you see on screen. The paint, silver birch, was a standard Aston Martin color of the period. Nothing exotic about it. The choice was practical. It photographed cleanly, and it felt understated in a way that suited the character. Bond didn't need a red car. Bond needed a car that looked like it belonged in Switzerland and could still eject you through the roof if you became inconvenient. The 4 cars and what each one did. Now, here is where we need to stop and establish something clearly, because this is a mistake that gets made constantly in discussions of the Goldfinger DB5. There was not one car. There were multiple cars, and each one had a different role and a dramatically different fate. Eon Productions received 2 DB5s from Aston Martin for Goldfinger. They have come to be referred to as the gadget car and the road car, though those terms are informal. The first, chassis number DP/216/1, was the primary gadget car. This is the one fitted with the full suite of working modifications by John Steer's team. This is the car that appears in the closest and most detailed sequences, the interior shots, the gadget demonstrations, the scenes that required the mechanisms to actually function on camera. This is the car Sean Connery is sitting in when he demonstrates the equipment to M and Q. This car was the star. The second, chassis number DP/216/2, was the road car, used primarily for exterior driving sequences, where the gadgets didn't need to function because the camera wasn't close enough to show them. This car had fewer modifications and was in many ways closer to a standard production DB5. Understanding which car did what matters enormously when the ownership story fragments after production wraps, because the 2 cars had very different lives after Goldfinger, and keeping them straight is the only way the rest of this story makes sense. After Goldfinger, the World Tour. Years when Goldfinger wrapped in 1964, both cars entered a period of promotional work that was, even by the standards of that era, extraordinary. The film became a cultural phenomenon of a scale that nobody had fully anticipated. The DB5 became, almost overnight, the most famous car in the world. Eon Productions and Aston Martin recognized the opportunity. The gadget car, DP/216/1, was sent on an extensive promotional tour of the United States. Auto shows, exhibition appearances, department store displays. This was 1964 and 1965. The car traveled across America as a piece of live marketing, and audiences lined up to see it. I want you to sit with that image for a second. The most famous car in the world, fresh off a Bond film that was breaking box office records globally, being driven around America to shopping centers and auto shows. No velvet rope in a museum, no climate-controlled storage. Just a car doing laps of the celebrity circuit because it was useful, and nobody had yet thought very hard about what it might be worth someday. This is a theme you will recognize if you have been following this channel. The cars that matter most are almost always treated as working tools while they are useful, and then quietly discarded when the usefulness runs out. Nobody in 1965 was thinking about what a DB5 from Goldfinger would sell for at auction in 2010. They were thinking about whether it drew a crowd at the Chicago Auto Show. It did. Every time. The road car DP/216/2 followed a different path. It was eventually sold, acquired by a private buyer, and entered what you might call the respectable phase of movie car ownership. It passed through several documented hands, appeared at events, and maintained a chain of custody that, while not airtight, was at least traceable. That car is now in the collection of the Lumen Museum in the Netherlands, one of the great private automotive collections in the world, where it sits in properly documented condition. That car has a happy ending. The other one does not. Or rather, the other one has a more interesting ending, which is not always the same thing. The first disappearance. How a car just vanishes. Sometime around 1969, the promotional tour wound down. The crowds went home, and somebody made a decision that still defies easy explanation. The primary gadget car, DP/216/1, the actual star car, the one with the ejector seat and the revolving plates and the machine guns built by hand by John Steers' team, was sold to a private buyer in the United States. No fanfare, no press release, no studio archivist pulling the chassis number and flagging it for preservation. Just a transaction, a handshake, a car changing hands like any other used vehicle moving through the market. And then it was gone. Not dramatically gone. Nobody reported it stolen, no headlines, no search. It did not disappear the way the Cobra Mercury disappeared, with a police report and a lawsuit, and Sylvester Stallone filing complaints in Los Angeles County Superior Court. It disappeared the way important things disappear, when nobody has yet agreed that they are important, quietly, completely. The trail stopped cold. For roughly 40 years, DP/216/1 did not exist in any documented sense. No auction records, no credible sightings anyone could verify, no insurance paperwork that raised a flag. The occasional rumor would surface in collector circles, make the rounds, and dissolve into nothing. People who knew the car's history and cared about where it ended up eventually reached the only conclusion the available evidence supported. It was probably gone, crushed, parted out, or repainted into anonymity somewhere in Middle America, indistinguishable from the handful of other silver DB5s that changed hands quietly over the decades. That assumption was almost exactly right, except for the crushing, and the parting out, and the anonymity, because the car was not gone. It was just very, very quiet, and the place it had been sitting, completely undisturbed for 4 decades, is the kind of detail that makes you put down whatever you are holding and just stare at the wall for a minute. The Boca Raton Mystery and the Airport Hangar. In 2009, a story emerged that, even now, is genuinely difficult to process if you care about automotive history. The primary gadget car, DP/216/1, had been sitting for approximately 40 years in a climate-controlled storage unit at a small airport in Boca Raton, Florida. An airport hangar in Florida for 40 years. I have to be honest with you. When I first went deep on this story, I sat with that detail for a while, because it is both completely inexplicable and entirely in keeping with how these things actually happen. The car wasn't hidden deliberately. It wasn't the subject of some elaborate scheme. It was just sitting there, owned by a man who kept it, didn't talk about it, didn't sell it, and didn't particularly feel the need to explain himself to anyone. The man who had the car was a private individual whose identity was not publicly disclosed when the car's existence was confirmed. He had purchased it in the late 1960s after the promotional tour wound down. He knew what it was. He kept it in storage. He didn't sell it during the years when its value would have been modest. He didn't sell it during the years when its value started climbing. He just kept it. At some point, apparently through intermediaries, word reached the right people. The car existed. It was in Florida. It was, by all accounts, in remarkable condition, given what it had been through. The original gadgets were intact. The mechanisms were still present, if not all functional. The body was original. The paint, while showing its age, was original silver birch. 40 years in a Florida airport hangar. The ejector seat still in the car. The revolving plates still in the car. The machine gun housings still in the car. Everything that John Steers and his team had spent months fitting in 1964. Still there, under a dust cover, in Boca Raton. If that doesn't make you feel something, I genuinely don't know what to tell you. The recovery and the auction. When the car's existence became known to the collector community, the interest was, predictably, immediate and overwhelming. This was not simply a famous movie car. This was the most famous movie car, the one that defined the entire category, the one that every subsequent movie car has been measured against for 60 years. R.M. Sotheby's handled the sale. The auction took place in 2012 in London, timed to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the James Bond film franchise. The timing was not accidental. Eon Productions had cooperated with the documentation and authentication process. The car's provenance was verified. The chassis number matched. The gadgets were confirmed as original Steers-built units. The estimate going in was somewhere in the range of $4 to $6 million. That was already a number that would have made headlines. The final hammer price was $4,600,000. Plus buyer's premium, the total transaction was approximately $6 million. At the time, it was the most expensive movie car ever sold at auction. The record has since been challenged and in some cases surpassed, but in 2012, that number stopped traffic. The buyer was not publicly identified. The car passed into a private collection where it has remained. It has been exhibited on a limited basis since the sale, appearing at select events and anniversaries. But it is not on permanent public display. A car that spent 40 years in an airport hangar is now worth 8 figures and lives behind velvet ropes. That is a sentence that works on multiple levels simultaneously. The other cars, where they ended up. Now, let's correct some things, because the mythology around the Goldfinger DB5 has produced more misinformation than almost any other movie car I have covered on this channel. And I have covered some that generated serious myths. There are, by various estimates, somewhere between 6 and 8 Aston Martin DB5s that have at various points been associated with the Bond franchise, either through actual production use or through authorized continuation builds. The continuation cars are a specific and important category. In 2018, Aston Martin announced a run of 25 continuation DB5s built to the original Goldfinger specifications, down to the working gadgets, produced in collaboration with Eon Productions. These were not replicas in the pejorative sense. They were genuine DB5s built by Aston Martin to the original brief. They sold for approximately £3.5 million each. All 25 sold before completion. These are sometimes cited in discussions of the Goldfinger car and used to muddy the provenance of the actual production vehicles. They are not the same thing. They are extraordinary objects in their own right, but they were not in Goldfinger. The distinction matters. There is also a third car associated specifically with the Goldfinger era that occupied a strange middle ground. A DB5 was used for promotional photography and poster work during the film's release campaign that was separate from the 2 production cars. This car's history is less well documented and has been the subject of considerable confusion over the years. Whether it survives in any form is genuinely uncertain. And then there are the outright fakes, modified DB5s, DB4s, and, in a few genuinely audacious cases, non-Aston Martin vehicles dressed to pass as the Goldfinger car. These have appeared at swap meets, in private sales, and on at least one occasion at a regional auction where the documentation did not survive contact with serious scrutiny. If someone offers you the Goldfinger DB5 for a price that seems reasonable, that is your answer right there. The Goldfinger DB5 is not available at a reasonable price. The landing. What this story actually means. Here is where I land on all of this, and I want to be straight with you about what this story actually means beyond the headlines and the auction numbers. The DB5 from Goldfinger was not just a car in a movie. It was a cultural object that arrived at exactly the right moment in exactly the right film, and embedded itself into the global imagination in a way that no studio marketing department could have engineered deliberately. It happened because the car was genuinely extraordinary, the film was genuinely extraordinary, and the combination produced something that neither could have created alone. And then the people who owned it treated it like a used car, not out of malice, not out of stupidity, just out of the simple inability that almost everyone had in 1964 and 1969 and 1975 to see far enough forward to understand what they were holding. The same thing happened to the Cobra Mercury from Stallone's Cobra. The same thing happened to the Charger from Dirty Mary Crazy Larry, sitting right now in a backyard in Sun Valley, California. The same thing happened to the Lightning trucks from the first Fast and the Furious. The people who had these cars were not villains. They were just people living in the present tense, which is what most of us do most of the time. You can't blame someone for not knowing, in 1969, that a car they paid a few $1,000s for would one day sell for $6 million. Nobody knew. And the man in Boca Raton, whatever else you might say about 40 years of silence, kept the car. He kept the gadgets intact. He didn't part it out or repaint it or strip the mechanisms to sell individually. He just kept it in a climate-controlled room and waited, whether he meant to wait or not. The car survived because one person held on to it. That's the whole story, really. One person in Florida who didn't sell. The DB5 from Goldfinger is now authenticated, documented, and in private hands at a value that puts it beyond the reach of all but a handful of buyers on Earth. The road car is in a museum in the Netherlands. The continuation cars are scattered across private collections globally. The myths and the fakes continue to circulate. The real ones are accounted for. And somewhere, 60 years after Sean Connery drove it across a film set in England, the primary gadget car still has the ejector seat, still has the revolving plates, still has the machine gun housings that John Steers spent months fitting by hand. Some things are worth holding on to. It just took a while for the rest of the world to agree. If this one hit different for you, drop a comment below. Tell me which movie car you want us to track down next, because there are more stories exactly like this one, and we are just getting started. Like the video, subscribe to American Muscle, and we will see you in the next lane.